Oh, I think I'm mic'd, so it doesn't matter. There we go. Thanks, David. It is a distinct pleasure to be able to play a very small part in the World Habitat Awards and to work with you and your incredible team. It is also a real honor to have been invited here to talk about housing affordability and homelessness with my friends and colleagues, new and old. Housing affordability and homelessness are, of course, two issues that I have been talking about and engaged in for a very long time. In fact, perhaps sadly, for all of my working life. Too long. But there is something about this particular moment in our collective history, June 2025, that makes today's solution-oriented conversation essential, urgent, in fact. It's not urgent just because 1.8 billion people are living in homelessness or grossly inadequate housing, though that should be reason enough. It's not urgent just because governments are manufacturing homelessness and then punish homeless people for being homeless, though that should be reason enough. It's not urgent just because governments allow financial firms and development interests to evict tenants and dwellers out of their homes and communities with nowhere to go, though that should be reason enough. And it's not urgent just because governments of all stripes believe they will build their way out of the housing crisis without recognizing the potentially dire consequences of that for our precious planet, let alone that they want to entrust all this building to the very same actors who helped cause the crisis and who won't build what people need, though that too should be reason enough. While all of these specific outrages warrant today's gathering, what makes today's conversation so essential, so urgent, is what underlies all of this, the underbelly of the housing and homeless crisis. When I pry things open or look under the carpet, so to speak, what I see is that we are in a dangerous era where the connection between home and human beings, between home, humanity, and the living world is being eroded and in many cases has been severed. Severing that relationship enables governments and their partners to think of housing in terms of mathematical equations, balance sheets, bottom lines, and ROIs. And that results in people, 1.8 billion people, being denied the right to live in peace, security, and dignity, the human right to housing. The starkest example of this is in Gaza. For 20 grueling months, the homes of Palestinians in Gaza have been a purposeful and strategic target of Israel's genocide. The decades-long dehumanization of Palestinians by the Western world and Israel, governments, media, and a variety of institutions, legal, medical, arts, is what makes it possible for unspeakable savagery to be unleashed, for Palestinian homes to be bombed and bombed again, destroying past, present, and future with barely a whisper from the world's governments. The specific targeting of homes by Israel in its genocide is itself proof of the home-human connection, as is the Palestinian determination, despite everything, to remain home. This stark example has forced me to think more deeply about what we lose when we sever the connection between home and humanity. It may serve us all well to meditate a little on the meaning of home, to remind us of its richness and connections that even housing advocates may forget as we go about our work. When I was the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to housing, I spent 6 years visiting people in their homes in every region of the world, talking to them about their home truths. I have probably been inside more homes than most people. I have seen people making home out of nothing. Corrugated steel, branches, tents, caves, sidewalks, shipping containers, wood planks. Invariably, there's an effort to make it home. A clothesline, carefully tended plants, a framed photo on a rickety table. No matter the context, I have been invited into these homes, offered tea, a biscuit, and a chat. The humanity in the interaction can be overwhelming. In so many of my conversations with people experiencing housing precarity and homelessness, I have been told the same thing. I just want to be treated like a human being. This richness of home finds expression by poets and writers, especially those displaced by conflict and colonialism. Poet Warsan Shire, born in Kenya to Somali parents, captures the refugee experience. She says, "You only leave home when home won't let you stay." Mohammed El-Kurd, in the context of being forcibly evicted from his family home in Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem, writes, "I cried not for the house, but for the memories I could have inside it." Indigenous poet and writer Jessie Thistle talks about home not as a structure of habitation, but as something understood through Indigenous worldviews about spiritual and cultural belonging and relationship to land, water, place, family, kin. In recent times, the home-humanity connection has been disrupted. For decades, governments have embraced predominantly neoliberal frameworks, pivoting housing policy away from benefiting people who inhabit it toward those with pecuniary interests in it, financial firms and investors. Governments use housing to kickstart economies without ensuring those in need can access it. Governments prioritize things like defense spending and policing over human well-being. And to facilitate this, they simultaneously demonize, dehumanize, and discriminate against people based on their disadvantaged housing status. We heard about that this morning. Homeless people are lazy or criminals or addicts, land grabbers, vermin. Social housing occupants are leeches on the system. And tenants, regardless of where they live, who complain are liars and whiners and troublemakers. As such, regardless of how visible, of how loud tenants and homeless people are, they are invisible and inaudible. In this way, home as we know it and need it, home in its essential form and function, has been taken away from us. And so the one question that keeps me up at night is, how do we return home? The home that poets write about and that people yearn for. A return home requires that we challenge neoliberal ideology and develop an alternative vision with different values that puts a primacy on humanity. For many years now, in a speech like this, I would have told you that international human rights law offers us that alternative vision that we so desperately need. I would have talked about the standards that human rights offer, like affordability, security, and habitability. I would have talked about human rights processes that ensure people whose rights are being violated participate meaningfully in decision-making and solutions. And I would most certainly have mentioned that human rights, at their core, are an accountability mechanism. Governments have signed international law and have legal obligations to implement it. But watching the world's non-response to the systematic destruction of Palestinian homes, an egregious violation of international law, is giving me pause. I find myself in an unfamiliar place right now. My core certainties, human rights lawyer, international human rights lawyer, former UN special rapporteur, my core certainties shaken. It's not human rights law that's the problem. It's the system of enforcement, I keep telling myself. Or is that right? Weren't the laws born of the system? It feels like a cage and I'm rattling around in it. A little while ago, my colleague Agnes Callamard visited Canada. She is the Secretary General of Amnesty International and a former UN Special Rapporteur. And while she was visiting, she gave an interview to a quite popular podcast. And in that interview, she did help me see a path forward. It was just one sentence, she said, but it really struck me. When asked about the status of international human rights law now in the context of Gaza and Sudan, she said, okay, yes, international law and its systems are fraught, crumbling. But then she said, but what's plan B? There is no plan B. That gave me pause. It drove me back to the opening words of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which talks about, quote, the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family as the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace. The human family. I want to believe in, put my stock in, support, defend, be part of the human family. The human family I see across the world fighting for justice and dignity. The human family right here in this room. The human family that World Habitat introduces me to every year for the awards, like the Puerto Ricans from Caño Martin Peña, who fought eviction and created a community land trust and now remain on their lands. The residents of an informal settlement in Jakarta, who also successfully fought eviction after their community was flooded and managed not only to stay, but to bring back others who'd been evicted. The group in Buenos Aires who converted underused spaces into architecturally designed cooperative housing, providing affordable housing for more than 150 low-income people. the public works studio in Beirut that created a rights complaint mechanism and has ensured greater security of tenure for so many households. We heard today from Homes for Good, providing affordable homes with supports, purchasing and refurbishing derelict and vacant homes and housing people. And Hastings Commons, right here in the UK, restoring derelict buildings into affordable housing and workspaces. The human family. So I will close here with a reminder to us, and I suppose to myself. Human rights, like the right to housing, attach to us because of our being human. They aren't earned, and they don't exist just because they are written in agreements that states have signed. Human rights are essential to being human and for humanity. This we know. That's the story of Gaza. We need to breathe life into what that can mean practically. We need a refreshed understanding of the universality of the human family and of what human rights can be. As you might have noticed, these days I draw some inspiration from poetry. And when I find myself lost or floundering, I often turn to it. I was recently reading some of the work of the poet Audre Lorde, and I was reminded of one of her more famous statements. She said, "Poetry is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity of our existence. Poetry is not only dream or vision, it is the skeleton architecture of our lives." Poetry doesn't just describe the world, right? It reimagines it. That's what we need human rights to do now. Just like poetry, human rights can be the architecture of our lives. They can provide an outline of what human wholeness, well-being, and potential can look like when we center our shared humanity. When I look at the World Habitat Award winners, for example, they're doing exactly that, reimagining what home and housing systems can be when we put human dignity first. That's how we return home, not by waiting for broken systems to be fixed, but by reimagining, rebuilding, and reforming housing systems ourselves, by making and by demanding connections between home and humanity from the ground up. Thank you.